Well, I enlisted in the United States Navy in August of 1978, and I ended up on board the USS America, where unfortunately I sustained some injuries on the flight deck while performing my duties, and in a roundabout way, since that, ended up at Sinklant Fleet Atlantic Command Support Facility in Norfolk, Virginia, on Hampton Boulevard, and was directly assigned to LOSF Division 22, which were a group of about 11 people then. We were directly responsible for briefing Admiral Trane. We briefed him on current military operations around the world, what the Soviets were doing that day, what they had done the night before. LOSF is just an acronym for Atlantic Operational Support Facility, and Sinklant Fleet is another acronym for Commander-in-Chief Atlantic Fleet, which Admiral Trane was at the time. Everyone on the eastern seaboard answered to this man. I was granted, after a 6-month wait, a top secret special compartmented intelligence clearance with a zebra stripe identification badge, which permitted access to all facilities on the base at all times. I had unrestricted access to any facility at any time, as well as the command center, which it was specifically granted for, so that I could be up on the mezzanine, or the third deck as we called it, up over the command center, to make sure that any incoming and outgoing audio-video information that came into the command center was recorded and duly logged for reference, or if they needed it for later. We're recording all the video and audio of everything that's going on, even when they set what was called a condition zebra alert, which was generally a training exercise. They would announce it beforehand: this is a drill, this is a drill, set condition zebra. And unauthorized personnel would be escorted out of the command center. It's the highest level of alert that the Navy has, or had at that time, for dealing with generally dealing with global nuclear threats, in particular the Soviets. Soviet Bearcats would routinely patrol up and down the eastern seaboard, watching what we were doing, and we would set a condition zebra if we had the need to put planes in the air to escort the Bearcats if they were a little too close to our airspace, or if they had ships in the area that were being a little suspicious acting, for instance. Or they would have a drill, for instance, where they would get out the mad books, they called them. The watch officer and the junior watch officer, the JOD, had keys to a safe, and they would get these books out, called the mad books, Mutual Assured Destruction, and they would have the codes that were necessary to transmit to the submarines out in the watching stations to, if necessary, to launch a nuclear strike. And not many people were allowed in the command center because they actually did use the codes and so forth that I'm sure the Soviets and any other persons who were enemies of the United States would have loved to have got their hands on. The zebra classification, without that, you were not allowed authorized access to these facilities during this drill. And the zebra drill was specifically for the highest level of top secret information that was being exchanged between the command center and ships and or submarines at sea. Well, the day started out pretty routine. I had gotten a cup of coffee. It was early in the summer, and I'd say around the first week or two in May, to the best of my knowledge. So everything was going along pretty just ho-hum routine. And they dimmed the lights first in the command center when they set a condition zebra alert. I always dim the lights first. They turned the lights down, and most of the times when they set these drills, they would say, this is a drill, set condition zebra. But they turned the lights down this time, and they didn't say this is a drill. And the watch officer and the junior watch officer looked at each other and said, were told some of their assistants to verify whether or not this was a drill as the event was taking place. And our early warning system of I believe it came in from the Air Force Base in Greenland at that time, to the best of my knowledge, or perhaps an early warning station up as far as Nova Scotia, that we had contact with an unidentified flying object that had entered our airspace. And they said that this was not a drill, and so it was treated with the utmost promptness, and everyone started just running around like mad once they realized it wasn't a drill, and it took on a whole different air. And within moments of that, the watch officer summoned Admiral Train over to the command center, because this was a little out of his area of authorization, for lack of a better way to put it. It required Admiral Train's oversight. And within minutes, Admiral Train was rushed into the command center, into his viewing booth that he had right under the mezzanine there. And the first thing that Admiral Train wanted to know was how many contacts we had, where they were, which direction were they going, and were the Soviets responding. Because we knew it wasn't the Soviets that had entered our airspace. That was verified from the get-go, from the very start. And at that point, when Admiral Train found out that it wasn't the Soviets, and that he wanted to know were the Soviets responding to this threat also, that was the moment that he gave authorization to put 2 planes up to go see what this thing was. And that's when the chasing up and down, began. We launched planes from as far north as Greenland to NAS Oceania. And this object, we had it on radar for, this event probably lasted, almost an hour perhaps. And pilots, you could hear the pilots' live voice transmissions being piped into the command center, visual confirmation on the object, description of the objects. Pilots were able to close a couple of times and be able to see that the object was not an aircraft that we were familiar with, was nothing that we had, was nothing the Soviets had, and that was determined very quickly. And this vehicle or plane or whatever it was that they were chasing showed very erratic flight up and down the coast, very quick flight. It would actually be off the coast of Maine, for instance, and would leave the airspace in that area so quickly that we were having to have planes coming out of Dover Air Force Base to pick it up, just in what seemed like moments. It would take, I know for a fact it would take, an F-14 probably 30 minutes to traverse that much distance. But this object, whatever it was just popping up. Just, 1 minute it was here, and the next minute, bam, it was down, several hundred miles, down the coast, just playing tag. It did go all the way down to a point off the coast of Florida around Mayport, the naval air station we have down there at Cecil Field, or had at that time. I think it's closed now. And that was before it turned and took it would have been an easterly direction from our vantage point back out towards the Azores before we actually lost track of it. And during all this, we have satellites called the KH-11 satellites that we use for information gathering. And this satellite did have a very high capability of taking really good photographs of things literally within just a few feet of the ground from a vantage point out in outer space. And they were trying to get the KH-11 satellite to track this thing to get some photographs of it. And they did. The satellite, the photographs that we did get back into the command center later on came from the first encounters that the planes had with it up off the North American coast. They did get close enough to get some photographs taken that were later brought over to the command center. Well, from the photograph, I could remember the shape. What I would have said would have been more like a well, it was quite flat. It was long. I would say a cylinder. I would say a cylinder because it was abrupt. It had abrupt ends. The ends didn't taper down like most aircraft. It just came to an abrupt end, and it did appear to be reflecting sunlight because you could clearly tell it was metallic, or appeared to be clearly metallic. And the pilots, they were giving information such as it was not leaving behind a vapor trail. No discernible lights, markings on it. No windows, cockpit windows, doors, nothing like that. It seemed to be just one solid thing, whatever it was. What was really bugging Admiral Train out, that was what was really driving him nuts, was this thing absolutely had complete control of the situation and could just be wherever it wanted to be just in a matter of seconds. 1 minute we're, closing on it, off the coast of Maine. The next minute it's in Norfolk, headed south towards Florida. And it's all we can do to alert get the early warning radar up down the coast to, watch for this thing as it just had it stay with us, just toying with us, for lack of a better way to put it. And Admiral Train and his staff they were quite concerned about it, to say the least. They were quite concerned, especially once they found out that it wasn't the Russians and it wasn't us. And he wasn't aware of anyone else who had the technology to build such a craft that could, whatever it was, could move about so easily and so quickly. And I remember distinctly looking over the rail over the mezzanine there, over the third deck, and just watching complete chaos, break out because of their inability to keep an eye on this thing, whatever it was then. Yeah. The thing was moving around so erratically and so quickly up and down the coast. They were trying to notify as many commands as they could up and down the coast to track this thing or get a plane up. As Admiral Train was doing, he was scrambling, authorizing planes up just left and right, up and down the whole eastern seaboard, and to try and cut this thing off, to get some planes coming in on it from the north and the south, for instance, to kind of, to literally trap it, to force it down. It was clear that they wanted to recover it, to force it down, or by whatever means possible. The order was given by Admiral Train to try and get this object forced down out of the sky, if at all possible, by whatever means possible. And that was, as I had said before, after they found out and knew for certainty that it wasn't the Russians. And after we found out it wasn't the Russians, they didn't care who it was, as long as it wasn't the Russians. They didn't care who it was or where it was from. They wanted it and wanted it bad. The information coming into the command center was being relayed to us from different radar sites that we have up and down the eastern coast that watch our airspace. The only descriptions that I recall that the pilots actually made were that they could not find any markings on the aircraft. They could not find any visible signs that the thing had wings, a tail, windows, a cockpit, or anything like that, or any markings from any country. I would describe him as being scared. Yeah, scared. Yeah, to put it in a nutshell. Yeah. He was usually a very calm man of, very mild demeanor, just a really nice fellow. And you didn't ever really see him lose control, raise his voice, get excited about anything. But this really got him, really had him upset, to say the least. And that was, I'd say that was the impression that I had from most of the officers that were with them. They were just as much in the dark and scared as everybody else. They would not actually track it down the coast. It would just appear hundreds of miles from its last sighting. And the pilots would, it would just, one moment it was there and the next moment it wasn't. And I think that was one of the things that really had Admiral Train's hackles up, because he didn't have any control over it or the situation. This thing just had a mind of its own and was causing such an uproar up and down the eastern coast, and him being ultimately responsible at that time, I'm sure it was stressing him out quite a great deal, which you could tell by his tone of voice. You could just tell, by listening to him, that he was very, very, very worried. But on radar, it was very unusual that the radar information that was coming into us that we were keeping track of was they would absolutely lose it one moment, and then we would pick it up. It would just appear as an unauthorized vehicle in military airspace, for example. And trust me, the military knows where every commercial flight is at all times. We knew where every plane we had was at all times. We knew where every commercial flight coming through our airspace was at all times. There just wasn't anything going on that we didn't know about it. Literally, there wasn't anything going on that we didn't know about. All the planes that were scrambled, that were put up off of shore facilities, because the Navy has shore facilities, the Naval Air Stations, for example, Oceana. When you set a condition zebra, whether it's a drill or not, people who are not authorized to be there who do not have a zebra access badge, it's a zebra stripe badge on your clearance badge, they have to leave the command facility, and we have Marines stationed outside the building there, in the building and as well as outside, that were under orders to shoot any unauthorized personnel that remained in the command center during one of these episodes. And that was supposedly for interest of national security. There's a door right here, and this guy, the Marine, comes in and wants to know what's going on. Is this a drill or so forth? They've got orders to start shooting people. And I know, because I actually got the junior OOD's attention and said, hey, you guys need to tell this guy something. He's ready to start shooting people, because they haven't told him to stand down yet, and which he did. And I remember, wanting to just get the hell out of there, because they were, well, he came in and, and he said, you've got a minute or two if I don't find out something. Oh, they were ready to come in and start shooting people. Yeah, destroying evidence and yeah. When this event, as I referred to it, ended, the object that we had been chasing up and down the seaboard and not really getting a whole hell of a lot of information from, and just playing, tag with this thing, it headed out over the Atlantic, towards the Azores. And I don't know who was responsible for getting this information, or who actually had it, or how they had actually gotten it. But I do remember them saying that it had pulled up at a 66-degree angle as it approached the Azores, like this, and it just pulled up at a 66-degree angle without slowing down or anything, and left the atmosphere, just was gone. It just took off into space and was gone, and just like that. And it just absolutely left. You're talking about something that covered thousands of miles in the blink of an eye, and it was just gone. And it just left everyone sitting around scratching their heads. Gee whiz, wonder what that was. It was comical in a way to see how the vast military might of the United States being put on its knees by something they had no idea what it was, where it came from, where it was going, or anything. And the only thing that they knew for sure was that it wasn't the Soviets. And they were very adamant about finding that out, whether or not it was something new the Soviets had came up with. We secured from condition zebra. They turned the lights up. Everyone is sitting around talking about it. You know, down on the command floor. I'm up here by myself on the third deck. Admiral Train is down here in his briefing area. They stayed for a few minutes before they left. And everyone's just, you know, making idle chit-chat about it and so forth and so on. I made a log of it, a note of it in my logbook, like you had to do, and really didn't give it much more thought. These two guys came in suits. They weren't in military uniform. They just came in suits and, you know, had their little badges on. They didn't have zebra stripe clearances. It was like a visitor's badge. They weren't, you could tell they weren't personnel there. And I didn't know them, Tom, Dick from Harry. I'd never seen these guys before. So we go out of Division 22 and we go down the stairs to the first floor, and there are several little conference rooms and so forth, and they took me into one they already had set up and set me down, and they had my logbook. You know, they got that and took it down with me, and these two gentlemen began to question me about this event. And I remember, you know, saying to them, they were being pretty rough, you know, about it, to be honest with you. And I remember telling them, literally putting my hands up and going, "Wait a minute, fellas, I'm on your side." You know, whoa, just a minute, because they were not really nice. They were very intimidating and made it quite clear to the point that nothing that was seen, heard, or witnessed that transpired during that was to leave this building. You not to say a word to it about your coworkers and off base. You know, just forget everything you may have seen or heard or whatever concerned with this. It didn't happen. But they were nice nasty, I guess is a good way to put it. And I distinctly remember sitting back in my chair, and I put my hands up and had to tell these guys, "Wait a minute, hey, we're on the same side, fellas. You know, we don't have a problem here," because you got the impression that they would do bodily harm to you otherwise. I mean, without really coming out and threatening you. Their tone of voice, well, you can just tell. You know, someone's, you know, letting you know, "Hey, buddy, do what I say or else." If this object had been hostile and wanted to drop weapons or shoot missiles at us or whatever, oh, they would have been it would have been very easy for them to do that. There was no question about that. And I'm not a pilot. We don't have anything, or didn't have anything at that time, that could hold a candle to whatever this was, and it was just had its own free run of our airspace and could do anything it wanted as far as traveling at will. We did not pose any threat to it whatsoever. That was painfully obvious, very, very much so. I do believe that Admiral Train knew that too, and was quite afraid that just might happen. Yeah, because yeah, just in a word, I'd say that old boy was scared, just plain old scared. What happened to the 35mm slides that we had? We never got around to putting them up on the telesign for Admiral Train to actually view. They were just prepared. I can remember her telling me that they came in, got up all the film, you know, developed and undeveloped, and all the materials they had with it, and the slides. And my logbook, I never did see that again. I know we had a new logbook the next day, a brand spanking new one to start with, and that disappeared. And I don't know what happened to it. Nobody really knew what happened to it. She said the same guys came in that took me downstairs that same day. They had already been over there to her lab. Because she was asking me what happened. She said, you know, what was going on? What happened? You know, she said, these two guys came in here and read us the riot act and wanted, you know, this, that, and the other, and rounded up all this stuff. And it went down as just an unidentified flying object. They never did know what it was. They never did know what it was. They just logged it off, literally, as an unidentified flying object, literally. I remember the watch officer and the JOD and the OOD, officer of the deck, and the junior officer of the deck. I do remember them looking at each other talking. And I'm just hanging my head over listening. You know, and they're talking to each other about how to put it in their logbooks. You know, how we're going to do this. He just said, put it down as an unidentified flying object contact. And that's it. Now, whether they got the same third degree as I did from these other two guys, I would think so. I would think everybody that was in the command center got it. I would say that the facilities that actually had this thing on radar, 5 that I'm sure of, and that's from Greenland all the way to Florida. 5 that I'm sure of. There may be some others, but but I don't know. But yeah, I'm aware of. And that's because I knew that because Admiral Train was giving orders to see if, NEAS Oceana, let's get some planes up from there, scramble some fighters. He did make a call for them to alert Dover Air Force Base, Patuxent River, Maryland, Cecil Field down in Florida. When I got out, I received an official United States Navy document on the Navy letterhead. They gave me this document where for 5 years, it was absolutely out of the question. I could not leave the country under any circumstances whatsoever. And to leave the state of Virginia, I had to contact the Roanoke office of the FBI and let them know if I just wanted to cross the state line down here to go into North Carolina or just leave the state of Virginia. I had to let the FBI know about it. And that was for 5 years after I was discharged. I was going to tell you about this guy. Jack Booth is his name. He's dead now, but he was in the Army and he was stationed at Roswell when the Roswell incident happened. And it's my wife's uncle, my wife's mother's brother. There were a bunch of these kids. He was from Bluefield, West Virginia, and his name was Jack Booth. And
what did he say?
That he said that when he was in the Army, just a kid in the Army, he was at Roswell when this thing, whatever it was, crashed. And he said that it was, he was there pulling guard duty when they went out to the crash site on a truckload of them to get debris up and whatnot. And that he was there when they actually did recover the bodies, and he was standing there. He said, and I'm telling you, he said they put little bitty guys in body bags, and he said they weren't humans. He said they were just little odd-looking fellows, He said they weren't nothing like a human. And they put them in body bags, and one or two of them were still conscious or alive or something like that from the crash. There were survivors. There were actual survivors from this crash, according to him now. I just remember him just saying they were just little bitty, non-human beings. I don't remember if he said how tall they were. They were picking up all the little pieces, and he said they actually put them guys down shoulder to shoulder on their hands and knees and went across the debris area, picking up any little speck and scrap of anything that they had. And they done it for days, for days. And that they were all threatened. He said they just came right out and said, look, you see anything about this, and you might just turn up missing tomorrow. But he did say that they were, they didn't, make any bones about it, and came right to the point about letting them know that how, much they wanted to keep this, under wraps. But he said, I'm telling you, he said, I was there. This would have been 1979, maybe. 1980, yeah. John Michael Murphy. He was a Marine Corps corporal when I was in the Navy. He was stationed down there at the security barracks at Sinclair Fleet. He was part of the security detail there for the base. And Murphy had swore him down that earlier, when he was over still in the Marine Corps, that he had actually guarded a spaceship, an extraterrestrial craft or whatever you want to call it, at a facility not far from Dover Air Force Base over in Delaware. And knowing Murphy as I did, yeah, I'd believe Murphy.
It was kind of grayish foil-like, maybe 8 to 10 inches long. I can't remember. It seemed giant-like when I saw it because it was the first time I'd ever seen anything like this before. And all eyes were just peeled on that particular thing, and when he told us what it was, it was frightening.